Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker. You are listening to episode 255 of the podcast, or you're joining live on Facebook or YouTube. Remember, if you want to catch the show live, subscribe on YouTube or Facebook and turn on your notifications so that your phone or your laptop or your tablet will let you know when we're going live, like right now. Solo episode today. Jeff the Animal Wilson feeling a little under the weather. He went and got his COVID-19 vaccine, and it really drained the life out of him. I can relate because when I got my second shot, it wiped me out the next day. I didn't feel like doing anything. Unfortunately, I didn't have the option to take a day off because when you have a toddler, there's no such thing as a day off. Please, guys, tell me all your opinions about vaccines in the comments. If you really want to see me ignore your comments, because I don't care. This is a show you should be listening to. That doesn't talk about that kind of stuff, like politics and vaccinations and the like. I don't care what you guys do with your bodies. That's your business. Today's Sunday, September 12th. Of course, one day removed from September 11th. That's how numbers work. 12 comes after 11. 20 years ago, a devastating attack on these great United States that we live in. Scariest time in my lifetime. I'm sure the same for a lot of you. Everybody remembers not only the day, but most people seem to remember exactly what they were doing when they found out what was going on. I was in 11th grade. I was in economics class. Couldn't tell you anything that I learned from economics class. I wish it was a little bit more practical, like teaching you how to do your taxes and how to write checks and stuff like that, like things that would have been useful as an adult. Anyway, I remember it pretty clearly because we had, just a couple of small televisions in my high school that were in some like central areas, and everybody just kind of gathered around them and waiting to hear news. And unfortunately seeing classmates pulled into guidance counselors' offices whose parents worked at the World Trade Center. I grew up just outside New York City in New Rochelle, New York. Longtime listeners of the show, I'm sure you're all aware of that. But yeah, so we had a lot of people who were closely affected by it, and it was a humongous tragedy. And something I would care to read about in the comments is, where you guys were when you found out what was going on that day. And I think it's a good opportunity to reflect, as tragic as it was, there was a lot of positive that came out of it. A lot of appreciation for people in the fire service and the police department, gas operations, EMTs and everything like that, who, came to the rescue for a lot of people. And actually inspired me to go into the fire service, which I did for 7 years of my life in the Larchmont Fire Department. So it's a very somber thing every year, of course. And, 20 years, it's amazing that it's been 20 years already, which means in another year I'll have been out of high school for 20 years. So that puts some things in perspective. But yeah, let me know what you guys were doing when you found out. I would be curious to read about that in the comments. JRJ says that he was coming home from a pub trivia night on a Tuesday in Australia. That's interesting. So even on the other side of the world, I'll just call you JR. JR, you remember exactly what you were doing, and you got a text to turn on the news. You won trivia, I hope. I wonder, just out of curiosity, do you remember any of the trivia questions that night? It's funny the things that like our brains kind of latch onto and choose to remember. But yeah, super somber time, but I hope everybody is able to find some appreciation for people who do heroic things, like a lot of people did in the wake of September 11th, 2001. You got to always try to find the positive in things, and at least a lot of us have some memories of people who became heroes during that time. And JR, for anyone curious, JR didn't remember any of the questions because it was a shocking time, of course, and stayed glued to the news all night. Well, cheers to Australia, because we've got quite a few listeners who tune in from Australia, and I don't even know. It's got to be like early in the morning over there because it's 6:45 p.m. here, Eastern time in the States. But cheers to you guys, and cheers to all the service people out there who are still being heroic. I'm sure a lot of them were inspired to join the services. Fire department, police department. There's probably a lot of active people right now who were inspired by the acts of a lot of brave people during 9/11 as well. Today, I am drinking Knob Creek Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey. Not a sponsor, of course. Just happens to be one of my favorite distilleries is Knob Creek. For those who don't know, this brand is owned by Jim Beam. You all know Jim Beam, of course. And it's kind of like their craft, like small batch brand, right? So Jim Beam obviously mass produced worldwide. You can find it in every liquor store. So they started making Knob Creek, which was more experimental, small batch stuff, and they just make some fantastic stuff. They make one of my current favorite bourbons, and I'm not going to tell you which one it is. This is one piece of information I'm going to hold back from you folks because I don't want a lot of people finding out about it because it's already like the secret's getting out. It was on the Whiskey Advocate list. That's the only hint I'll give you. It was on Whiskey Advocate 2020. So this is a rye whiskey. Now you guys know, if you're longtime listeners, bourbon's my first love. I love a good bourbon. Everything that comes out of Buffalo Trace, I'm a huge fan of. Obviously, Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, E.H. Taylor, stuff like that. Bourbons tend to be a little bit sweeter because they're primarily corn. They have to be 51% corn. Rye whiskey, you guessed it, in order to be called rye, has to be 51% rye. And then the rest could be, whatever. It could be barley, it could be corn, it could be wheat. So whiskeys that are made with wheat tend to be on the sweeter, smoother side, that smooth profile that's so desirable for a lot of you. Rye whiskey is typically a little spicier, a little more peppery. And I say typically because that's, the standard, because the rye grain has that spice to it. But the other 49% of the whiskey will kind of determine, are they going to play up that rye spice and make it like a 75% rye, or are they going to try and smooth it out with some corn, with some wheat, stuff like that? This Knob Creek rye, even though it's 100 proof, It drinks super smooth. It's not hot at all. And it has like, so the ryes that I enjoy have like a scent of like fresh baked bread. And they don't carry a lot of that spiciness. Um, and it has like that kind of smoother, weedier flavor to it. That's what the Knob Creek rye is like. And I do quite enjoy it. This bottle in particular, I got it because I was in a local liquor store, and it was like, buy any of these 2 bottles, and you get $10 off or whatever it was. So I had been wanting to try the Knob Creek rye, but the Knob Creek came with a mason jar cocktail set thing. And I want to get the name of it correctly so I can give them a little shout out here. Camp Craft Cocktails. So I guess, maybe it's designed cocktails you can take camping. And I'll post a photo of this on my Instagram later at MMA on the Rocks. I'll put it in the story. I'll throw a picture up on Twitter as well. So basically what it is, it's a mason jar that comes with the bottle of whiskey, and it had some dried fruit in it. It had some dried orange slices, dried apricots, dried cherries, and a few sugar cubes. So what you do, and it's a small mason jar, it's like maybe a 12 ounce. So what you do is you fill the jar with the whiskey, which is why, a lot of this bottle is gone. I didn't do all of this damage myself. A lot of people might think I drink excessively, but I really only drink while I'm doing this show and while I'm not. So, but only those 2 times. So if you think I drink excessively, you're clearly wrong. So you fill the mason jar with the dried fruit and the sugar cubes with the whiskey, 12 ounces of whiskey, and then you just leave it in the fridge for 3 days. And, all the fruit rehydrates, and obviously releases the flavor into the whiskey, and the sugar dissolves into it. And then you strain it over ice, and it becomes an old fashioned. Pretty delicious, I have to say. I'm usually not a fan of these kinds of things, like pre-made cocktails. Like, if you guys were listening to the show last week, I was telling you how I made my own burnt sugar cherry simple syrup for old fashions. I like to, besides distilling my own whiskey, I like to use my own ingredients when I make cocktails and when I come up with cocktail recipes. So this is not something I would have reached for. I only got it because it came with the Knob Creek. It was very tasty. So I let it marinate in the fridge for 3 days. You take it, you shake it up, you pour it over ice. Again, I'll share pictures of how it all came out. And it tasted really good. That it complemented the rye really well. It brought out the sweeter notes, the dark cherry notes, the brown sugary notes of the rye. So if you like an old fashioned, which is, a sweeter whiskey cocktail, it would be worth trying. I would say look for the set with the Knob Creek that comes with the cocktail, because I looked this company up, and they're a smaller company, but the one mason jar will cost you about $25. And, just you could basically figure out the recipe and kind of make this yourself, DIY. But I guess for like a small business, like they have to mark it up to even make it worth it to turn a profit. So it's a cool idea. If you wanted to do like a cocktail party or something, get a few different ones and set them in your fridge 3 days before, pop them out, and then let everybody at the party sample different cocktails. I would definitely recommend trying it. If you can't find the set, then at least try it one time. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't drink it regularly. That would, that would end up getting really expensive. But you do get about 8 cocktails out of one jar. Now, I'm only going to get about 4 out of it because I pour with a pretty heavy hand, as you guys can imagine. But yeah, I would say look for the set, look for the gift set. I'm always looking at these gift sets in the liquor store, because typically they'll actually be cheaper than buying the bottle by itself, depending where you go. If you go to like a chain store, like I go to Walgreens here in Florida quite often, the gift sets will be cheaper than buying the bottle itself. So, why not? You get some extra stuff with it and you get your booze a little bit cheaper. It's win-win. JR wants to know if I've ever tried Stranahan's whiskey from Colorado, and it's their favorite American liquor. I have tried Stranahan's. I actually have a bottle of it in my desk at work. So that's my bottle that I have on hand in my office, which I know what you guys are thinking. I don't drink at work regularly. Like maybe on a Friday afternoon, I'll have a little pour before I leave the office. If it's like a late day. But yes, I have tried Stranahan's. I've actually been to the distillery. It was one of the first distillery tours I've ever been on, and actually learned quite a bit doing it. It was really well done distillery tour. I love Colorado. I love the whole. I've only been once. Went to Denver, went to Boulder, went to Colorado Springs, everywhere in between. They have the Oscar Blues brewery somewhere between Colorado Springs and Denver. It's in like a little one-horse town. Like it's just like there's a post office, there's a pinball arcade, and there's the Oscar Blues brewery, and it's the only thing in any direction for miles. But Stranahan's was awesome, and they actually have a really cool story about how they started making their whiskey, and I don't want to tell it wrong, so I would say look that story up. I think the story was something like this guy was making beer in his barn, and the barn caught fire, and the fire department showed up, and he kept running back into the barn, and they were like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I have barrels of beer in there. And so the firefighters, like any responsible firefighters, were like, all right, well, show us where it is, and helped them roll all the beer barrels out. But I guess the barrels were no good anymore. So then he had to put the beer in whiskey barrels, or maybe it was the other way around. He had whiskey in there and he had to put the whiskey into beer barrels. And then in some way, there was some kind of cross aging with beer barrels and whiskey barrels, and then that's kind of how the recipe came about. And then there's actually a distillery pretty close to me in Dunedin, Florida, called Cotherman's. I'm usually drinking out of their glass too. And Cotherman's, the guy who owns that is actually friends with the owner of Stranahan, so he kind of got his whiskey making expertise from those folks. So he kind of makes a whiskey in the same sort of way. And I got to try their whiskey in batch number 2 when they were first starting to make whiskey. And it was a little bit rough, but they have kind of hammered out the kinks in the recipe. All right, so that's your 20 minutes of booze talk. I could go on, but I'm sure you guys, some of you anyway, at least, are tuning in for some mixed martial arts. Is that what we talk about here? Yeah, that is MMA on the rocks. I know where I am now. Speaking of MMA on the rocks, if you guys want to grab some merchandise, you can do so through our friends at Team Reaper. The website is reaper1.co, not .com, .co. And I'll put all the links to our merchandise right in the show notes for you guys. You can use promo code MMA Rocks 10. That's MMA ROCKS 10. Save yourself 10% on your whole order. And not just on our merchandise, they have gear bags, jiu-jitsu gis, Muay Thai shorts, hats, t-shirts, all kinds of stuff. So you don't have to buy our merchandise. Of course, I would greatly appreciate if you did, but you can use the promo code to buy anything on the website. They have a lot of cool stuff on there. So go check out our friends at Team Reaper, reaper1.co. As far as our merchandise, we have currently tank tops, hoodies, and t-shirts, all in the kind of charcoal gray look of the logo. Which I was thinking, maybe I'll change it up and do a different shirt or something. We need a Jeff the Animal Wilson shirt, because then I can wear it when he can't make it on the show. Like right now, I would be wearing my Jeff the Animal Wilson shirt. If anybody's a graphic designer out there and wants to volunteer some artwork, definitely open to it. I was thinking of like a panda, like a panda bear eating a bowl of soup for the Jeff the Animal Wilson graphic. I just feel like that would be appropriate. Only long-time listeners are going to get that reference, and we're going to keep it that way. All right, so Team Reaper, if you want to grab some merchandise. I will talk about the Triller fights. It's Triller, right? Not Thriller. Triller. Feel free to correct me if you want. I don't really care either way. So Triller is like a social media company, I guess. And they've been putting on, boxing fights with the Paul brothers and things like that. And this card was supposed to be Vitor Belfort, of course, former UFC champion Vitor Belfort. And Oscar De La Hoya, which was a fight that made 0 sense. One, because why was Triller promoting it when Oscar De La Hoya has his own promotion company? Two, why is Oscar De La Hoya a guy who was always adamant about weight classes, fighting a guy who spent his entire mixed martial arts career pretty much at either 185 pounds or 205 pounds? Like, why was this? This made 0 sense at all. Like, unless they had some kind of personal vendetta that I'm not aware of, I don't really know why this fight came together. And then I guess it was 2 weeks before the fight. I can't keep track because I honestly really didn't care. I had no intention of watching this card before. I had no intention of watching it when a replacement fighter was put on it. I just saw the clips on social media, and that's how that's how I wound up seeing it. But so about, I guess 2 weeks ago, Oscar got COVID and released a video saying that he was really broken up about it. I'm like, okay, look, I have all the respect in the world for Oscar De La Hoya's body of work, which is the same thing I would say about like Conor McGregor or John Jones. And then it kind of ends there. Like, as far as who he is as a person and, obviously the drug addiction and everything like that. Yeah, no thanks. I mean, he doesn't seem like a very good person to me. I don't know him personally, so I'm not going to trash talk the guy, but it just seems like a lot of what I've seen of him lately, showing up drunk to things. And I mean, who am I to criticize that? Since that's the basis of my entire presence on the internet. But I'm not a promoter. I'm just a guy sitting in his house drinking whiskey. Man, that is a good rye. If you like rye whiskey, or even if you don't like rye whiskey, the Knob Creek is a good transition one because it doesn't have that burn your taste off spice that some ryes do. So Oscar gets COVID, and they say, who can we find that's a big name, that's in shape, and that's willing to get in a cage with a fully re-steroided Vitor Belfort? We all saw Vitor when USADA started coming into play with the UFC. We saw how deflated he looked. he wasn't allowed to do his TRT treatments anymore, and also had to cut back on whatever other questionable substances he was putting in his body. But that's all out the window now that he's not with the UFC anymore. Obviously, he's going to find places to compete that, the drug tests are multiple choice. It's like, did you A, take steroids, B, not take steroids, C, like, prefer not to answer? And no matter which box you check, like, they'll still let you compete. I imagine that's what Triller's drug testing policy is. So they come up with Evander Holyfield. And man, it was just hard to watch, man. Evander is such a legend. Like, one of the greatest heavyweight boxers of all time. I mean, countless amazing performances. And the guy was known for being able to take a beating and still come back and compete. When he wasn't even a true heavyweight, he was really like a light heavyweight who was just so dominant and so quiet and well-mannered that nobody would pay attention to him at light heavyweight. It didn't matter. So he had to move up to heavyweight because that's where the marquee fights were. Unfortunately, his legacy is largely going to be getting his ear bitten off by Mike Tyson. And now taking this fight at 58 years old, I believe he is, and getting knocked out in the first round. I just want to know who let this guy take this fight. Like, who in his life cares about him so little that they allowed him to do this? And then who's the doctor who had even one conversation with this man and said, yeah, I think it would be a great idea to let him go get punched in the head in a competition. And now, if this was billed as an exhibition, which I believe it was, this was not a professional match that goes on his record or anything like that. I believe this was an exhibition. Whoever made it an exhibition didn't let Vitor Belfort know, because Vitor came out guns blazing, looking to take the head off of this poor man. And I don't know what to say, man. It just it was just disgusting. I was disgusted. Like, why? Like, so many things had to go wrong for Evander Holyfield to get in there at 58 years old and do this. Like, they won't even let you play a baseball game past your 40s. And there's a reason for that, because your body just doesn't function the same. This would be like me letting my dad get in a boxing match now at this point in his life. I mean, granted, my dad was not like a world champion professional athlete, but still, there's no denying that Evander's been punch drunk for a long time, like maybe 20 years. And Mark is saying it was Dr. Nick Riviera. Is that the doctor from The Simpsons? Hi, everybody. It probably was that doctor. Hi, Evander Holyfield. You want to fight? Okay, no problem. You pay me $129.95. I will get you license. That's probably what happened. It was one of those doctors. It just horrible. Like, and I guess they got the result they were looking for because everybody saw it. It was all over the internet. And of course, everybody says, well, nobody's paying for these fights. How are they making any money? Like, well, they're a social media company and they're getting all these views. They know people aren't paying for it. I imagine they're a step ahead on this. They're playing chess, not checkers. And they're getting tons of social media revenue, however that is calculated, whatever algorithms come into play there. They're making their money back. There's no question. So, but fuck them. because I'm upset that they did that to Evander, man. This guy is a legend. He should be celebrated at this point in his life. You know, not being put in some like dog and pony show to get beat up by some roided up former MMA fighter. That's not how this should happen. You know, this is a guy who competed in the Olympics. He was a world heavyweight champion in boxing, had some of the most epic fights of all time, and became the heavyweight champion even though he wasn't a true heavyweight. You know, I can't stress that enough either. Just really sad, man. On the other hand, like, if it had been Oscar, would anybody be upset? Like, is that the most fucked up thing about this? Is it's like, because a lot of people are upset about this, but if Oscar De La Hoya went in there and got trashed by Vitor in the first round, would anybody be having these same conversations? I probably wouldn't. I'll be honest with you. I'd be like, yeah, well, you know, he kind of acts like a jackass, which kind of goes against my moral code when it comes to talking about combat sports. Which I'll be a hypocrite again and tell you it was very satisfying seeing Tito Ortiz get knocked out. Just because the guy's a bonehead. Like, everybody who gets annoyed with like Colby Covington now, and who else? I don't know, Connor. You guys have no idea how obnoxious Tito was back in the day, especially because you didn't have a whole lot of pay-per-views. They were only like every other month or every 3 months. So like Tito was always going to be on one, and he was like always part of the press conferences and stuff. And he's just not a well-spoken dude. Like, he's just a bonehead. So, and he would do like very obscure things, like trying to get people riled up. Just always been a bit off. You know, doesn't have a whole lot of fans, I imagine. So, you know, a lot of people, and people love Anderson Silva. So a lot of people were thrilled to see Anderson put him down in the first round in 22 seconds, whatever it was. Personally, I think the Tito fight was rigged. I think he took a dive just because they knew that a 20-something second knockout would really get a pop on social media, and it would probably go viral because Tito is just so unliked. And, you know, real boxing is rigged so often that, is it outside of the realm of possibility that this fake boxing circus, sideshow, whatever you want to call it, would be rigged? Absolutely not. I just thought, you know, it was like a tight hook that he landed, and he landed right behind the ear, and then it looked like he hit him with a shot behind the head too. But Tito Ortiz has been competing for so long, and he's been hitting the head with 4-ounce gloves, and he's never been knocked out like that. You know, he's only been like TKO'd. He's never been put out cold that I can remember. So I think it was a work. I think he took a dive. It looked like he was swinging really wide when he was missing Anderson, when he was doing the bobbing and weaving. Now, don't get me wrong, Anderson Silva is that good. He does have that crazy good head movement, but I think it was a dive by Tito. It didn't look real to me. But either way, it was still satisfying to watch. And I hate saying that because, again, that goes against, you know, my own personal code when it comes to talking about combat sports, where I really do respect everybody who gets in there and does the damn thing, just because I know what it takes, and I've trained with so many hardworking folks over the years, and I've seen the sacrifices they make and everything like that. You know, all the cliche stuff. But yeah, seeing Tito get face planted, pretty satisfying, just because he's been such a bonehead over the years. But I normally don't say that. It must be the rye whiskey. You know, normally I'm drinking bourbon or scotch, and, you know, I'm a little more subdued. But this rye, it really brings out the edge in me, I guess. That's not a knock on Knob Creek either. They make a fine product. Please sponsor me, Knob Creek, if you're listening to this. Tag Knob Creek in the comments. Tell them to sponsor the show. I'll only drink Knob Creek on the show. They do. There's not a lot of distilleries I would say that about. Buffalo Trace, Knob Creek, Old Forester, Maybe there is a lot. Any Isla distillery in Scotland. All right, I'm a whore for whiskey. What can I say? So that was it. I don't know. I don't even know what else was on that Triller card. I hate even mentioning it and bringing any attention to it, but it is what it is. It happened. There was no UFC going on this weekend, so we might as well talk about it. Let's take a look at next week, shall we? And let me get the old screen share going on here. So next week is one of these cards where, like, a lot of people, I guess, are kind of disappointed in it. It's one of those cards, like, not a lot of star power, not a lot of big names. Almost forgot how to enlarge this. There we go. That way I can bring it onto this screen so I can read it here. I might need some spectacles soon, folks. Might be hitting that point in my life. I need some glasses. UFC Fight Night 192. This is UFC Vegas 37, I think. I don't know. And this one is going to be at the Apex. It's funny because a few weeks ago, there was some fight card. I don't even remember which one it was. And I had said on here, and this will be the last one at the Apex for a while. And somebody who listened to the show sent me a DM and said, hey, you said that card was going to be the last fight at the Apex for a while, but the next 3 cards are scheduled at the Apex. And listen, I tell you guys all the time, don't come here for accurate information. You come here for entertainment and booze and, like, I guess a little bit of information about MMA. But there are no guarantees, just like in life. Nothing is guaranteed in life. My buddy Dan Tom dropping in to say hi, and then Bill is the man. Your check's in the mail, buddy. You guys all know Dan Tom from MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast. And you know him from this show because he was the guest host 2 or I think 3 weeks ago. I don't know. Time is blurry for me right now. And it's not just the whiskey. It's just being busy with a lot of stuff. And the whiskey. It's also the whiskey. All right, so I don't see how you're not excited about this card. We got Nikolas Motta against Unknown Fighter. How do you not get hyped up for that one? No. The main event, Anthony Smith and Ryan Spann. This is a fantastic fight. And this fight is going to be extremely telling for Anthony Smith. Because here's a guy who, some might say is a bit of a journeyman, but, he's fought for the title. It seemed like he was going to be on a decline. And then he pulls off the first round submission victory over Devin Clark. And then the first round doctor stoppage over Jimmy Crute in his last 2 fights. And he's on a total resurgence. And this is a guy who, for whatever reason, I guess, couldn't stay out of his own way in some fights. Maybe it was the pressure of fighting John Jones. And then, the pressure of feeling like he had to redeem himself from that performance. That fight with Glover Teixeira where he was beating the brakes off of him. And then, Glover just turned it right around and knocked Anthony's teeth out of his head, literally. Then on the other side, you have Ryan Spann, who's the up-and-comer, 30 years old, which is not incredibly old for light heavyweight. If this was a heavyweight, he would be like a freshman. 30 years old is like, that's when you start training as a heavyweight fighter. You pick up fighting like 30-31 as a heavyweight, you're like, maybe I'll try this out. That's when you get off the couch and you pick up a jump rope for the first time. Ryan Spann, fantastic UFC career if you look at it. Came off of Dana White's Contender Series, some Fight Night performances, fought Nogueira, knocked out Nogueira on his first pay-per-view, UFC 237. Also a submission victory over Devin Clark, who's also on this card, I believe. Then he had his one setback, got knocked out by Johnny Walker, with that nasty elbow. That was UFC Fight Night 178 back in September of last year. So that was a year ago. And then he took, a good 6 months off, came back, knocked out Misha Cirkunov in his last fight. So Ryan Spann's a good fighter. You kind of think of him because he's got a lot of knockouts in the UFC, but most of his wins come by way of submission. And Anthony Smith is a really great grappler as well. So personally, everybody loves a good stand and bang matchup, but personally, I would love to see how this one plays out on the ground between, Anthony Smith, who's a black belt, and Ryan Spann, who has, I believe, 11 submission wins under his belt. My buddy Ryan wants to know if he missed the Grandpa Holyfield versus TRT Vitor coverage. Yeah, you missed that one, buddy. You're gonna have to rewind and to go back and check that out. And I did it again where my menu pops up on my screen that I'm sharing, and you guys can see that I never read emails. Send me an email at MMAonTheRocks@gmail.com, and I promise you I'll read it. But I just have like a lot of junk in my email. I have 3 email addresses attached to this thing with unread emails. So there's that. I'm running out of whiskey. We got to get through this. I don't know which way to go on this one. Ryan Spann, the only dent in his game we saw was getting knocked out by Johnny Walker, but that guy could knock out anybody on any given night. Anthony Smith, it's just a matter of, does the Anthony Smith who's unsure of himself after fighting John Jones show up, or does the Anthony Smith who showed up in his last 2 fights show up? And even if he does, will that make a difference? Is Ryan Spann, too young, on got too much momentum behind him? Because let's face it, Anthony Smith has more to lose in this one. If he loses this fight, he's going to get knocked down a little further down the ladder, because the UFC sees, all right, you're working the desk now. You're starting to, dip your toes in different ponds here. It looks like you're thinking about moving on. If you lose this fight to this young contender, we know you're not competitive at the championship level. We're going to knock you down significantly. So main event for Anthony Smith. I would imagine if he loses, it will be his last main event. So, and I'm not saying he's going to lose. I'm just saying there's more pressure on him. Like Ryan Spann will be able to lose this fight and bounce back easier because he's younger in his career. It doesn't have as many miles on him. So, high risk, low reward for Anthony Smith here. If you win, it's got to be impressive, and you've got to call out Jan Blachowicz, who's going to be fighting Glover Teixeira for the title, I believe. Call out the winner of that, because you got a loss to Teixeira that you want to avenge, and what better way to do it in a title fight? And I don't believe he's fought the champ yet, so there's that. But this is a really fun main event. And then the co-main event, Ion Cutelaba and Devin Clark. That's just a fun one for me. I'm excited every time I see Cutelaba on a card. I know he had some rough outings his past few fights. There was the knockout loss to Akhmedov. I want to say. Let me pull this up. Now I have this screen up and you guys can see when I actually look things up. All right, so his last fight was a draw with Dustin Jacoby. I don't remember that fight at all. Magomed Ankalaev knocked him out in the first round. That was back in October of last year. Wow, didn't seem like that long ago. And then before that, it was the TKO loss to Ankalaev that was very controversial because he was like doing a rope-a-dope, and then Kevin McDonald stopped the fight. Does have a win over Khalil Roundtree, though. Who's looking spectacular again. So this is just a fun fight. And Devin Clark, has losses to each of the guys in the main event. So if he wins against Cutelaba, I'd be calling out like the winner or loser of that fight afterwards. Ariane Lipski against the undefeated Mandy Bohm. I'm not too familiar with Mandy, but she is undefeated, 7-0. Here's an exciting fight. Arman Tsarukyan and Christos Giagos. So Tsarukyan, just a really fierce grappler. Like his grappling is really tight. And Giagos is pretty well rounded. Coming off of 2 wins. His last fight was in May. He submitted Sean Soriano in 59 seconds. So this will be an interesting one because, Giagos has submissions. Will Tsarukyan take him to the ground? Because he probably has the ability to do so. But then Giagos has knockout power too. He's got quite a few knockouts on his record. So that's a fun fight. I love how I set this screen up so that I can look at it in front of me, and I'm still looking up at the monitor like I'm in the Brady Bunch credits. Anyway, here's my sleeper fight pick for you guys. This is the one I would definitely tune into, even though it's on the prelims. Joaquin Buckley and Antonio Arroyo. This fight will be nuts because Arroyo can strike, and we know Buckley can strike. He's got, the KO of the century with that spinning kick. Arroyo is coming off 2 straight losses. He hasn't won a fight since getting into the UFC from Dana White's Contender Series back in July of 2019. Pretty well rounded. He's got 4 KOs and 4 submissions. But how do you not get excited about seeing Joaquin Buckley fight? When there's a chance you might see something that you've never seen before. So that's my sleeper fight. Joaquin Buckley, Antonio Arroyo. Mike Rodriguez and Tafon Nchukwi. That'll be a fun fight. Pani Kianzad is going to fight Raquel Pennington. I feel like this is a fight that more people should be talking about. This is going to be a step up in competition for Pani. And Raquel Pennington needs to, work her way back up the card. So she needs to come into this hungry for sure. Let's see. Montel Jackson against Jp Baze. Of course, JP is known for his wife also being a UFC fighter. Erin Blanchfield against Sarah Alpar. That should be a good one. And another early prelim to keep an eye on, Ipa Kasangane against Carlson Lindsay Harris. Kasangane is another explosive striker that's really fun to watch. He's only been knocked out 1 time in his career, and it was by, you guessed it, Joaquin Buckley in that crazy catch kick spin shit thing that he did. You know what I'm talking about. And then Gustavo Lopez and Hailey Alatang. There's a lot of fights on this card. 15 fights on this card. Emily Whitmire and Hannah Goldy, curtain jerker of your evening. Emily Whitmire 4-4. Hannah Goldy 5-2. Hannah Goldy looking for her first win in the UFC, I believe. Double check that for you guys, just because I'm such a nice guy. Let's see. Yep, she won on the Contender Series and received her first professional loss in the UFC to Miranda Granger and lost her last fight, both by unanimous decision, though. So, she just needs to get her bearings, I believe. But, 3 losses in a row, not a good look. I'm excited for this card. I don't know about you guys, but I love MMA. I know a lot of you today are probably watching football because that's back. I don't watch that personally, so it's all about MMA for me. So I love a weekend when there is a card. Yeah, I was thinking I wouldn't have much to talk about on this episode, and here we are creeping up on an hour. So that's that. I guess we did have a lot to talk about. A lot of whiskey talk on this episode, which if you guys like that, the new channel is in the works. It's going to be more whiskey based, more interviews, less MMA. Just looking for a way to create some different content because I do really enjoy doing this. It's a really fun hobby. I enjoy talking to people about whiskey. I enjoy talking to people in general, as long as it's like in a situation that I'm in control of and not like at a toddler birthday party like I was at this morning. And happy birthday, by the way. Toddler birthday parties are not the most fun thing to do, though. This is the one thing I miss about quarantine is that we got a year off from the toddler birthday parties that were kind of consuming our lives for the time before the pandemic. I'm going to pour myself a little bit more of this Knob Creek rye here, and then I'm going to go downstairs and make some dinner. That's how the rest of my night is going to go. Let me know how the rest of your weekend is going to go. We're approaching fall now. Happy pumpkin spice season to all of you folks out there who are believers in the pumpkin spice. Cheers to you. People get so excited about the pumpkin spice. I like some pumpkin stuff, I'll dabble with a pumpkin beer now and then. I'm not ashamed to admit they're delicious. It tastes like dessert. And it gets you drunk. So it's better than dessert. Like if you just eat pie, you just get fat. But if you drink booze, you get fat and happy. So, life lessons here on MMA on the Rocks. If you guys want to get a hold of Jeff the Animal Wilson and send him some love because you missed him so dearly, like I did this week, because I got to be honest with you guys, my throat gets a little dry talking for an hour, which is why I need all this whiskey. So if you want to get a hold of Jeff, you can do so at animal_Wilson on Twitter and Instagram. And you guys can get a hold of me. You know how. You've all done it. At MMA on the Rocks. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Whatever. I don't have TikTok. I don't even fully understand what that is. But everything else I have. I'm going to post the pictures of that cocktail I was telling you guys about earlier on my Instagram story and on Twitter. So go check those out if you're curious. I will post a link to the company as well. I would say, if you have the means, support a small business and check them out. It's definitely worth it. Craft cocktails. They are pricey though, so I would recommend looking for the gift set that they sell at the liquor store. It would be a better better bet, better bang for your buck, and at least you get to try it out, before you commit to buy an expensive bottle. But if you want to do a cocktail party or something, it would be worth it. Reach out to me if you have any comments, feedback, criticism. I do handle criticism fairly well, which is why trolls don't bother with me too much. And I'll just put up the merchandise link one more time. That's reaper1.co if you want to grab an MMA on the Rocks t-shirt, hoodie, or tank top. I still don't have one of the tank tops. Oh, no, I have the tank top. I still don't have one of the sweatshirts, believe it or not. I might have to grab one of those. I will be away next week. I will be up in New York to visit my darling baby niece, Emily. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited for my daughter to meet her for the first time. She's been excited about getting on an airplane and going to meet her baby cousin for a while now. So it'll be really cool to see them together. So I don't know what next week's show is going to look like. I will bring my laptop. I will prepare to do a show, but I will not make a promise to you guys that a show will actually appear. And I'm going to be also recording some content next week for the new show, whose name I will not reveal yet. I do have it. I do have the social media handles. I'll be announcing it in the next couple of weeks and probably launching that YouTube channel. I would hope by the end of September, early October, just in time for pumpkin spice season. For all you pumpkin spice lovers out there. All right. That's it. That's all we got. Go give Jeff the Animal Wilson some love, will you? Until next time.